The lights never dimmed in Gary, Indiana. Not for Michael Jackson. While other children played in the streets until darkness fell, Michael rehearsed. His father's hand gripped the belt tighter than it gripped compassion. 5 years old, standing on a chair to reach the microphone, Michael learned his first lesson: perfection wasn't optional. It was survival. The Jackson 5 exploded onto the scene like a firework nobody expected. Ed Sullivan's stage became their kingdom. Teenage girls screamed until their voices cracked. Michael, barely 11, moved like electricity had replaced his bones. His brothers harmonized around him, but everyone knew the truth. The youngest Jackson was different. Special. Cursed with a gift so powerful it would eventually devour him whole. Berry Gordy saw dollar signs in Michael's smile. The Motown machine churned out hits like a factory, and Michael was the prize product. I Want You Back topped the charts. Then ABC. Then The Love You Save. Success piled upon success until the weight became unbearable for shoulders that hadn't finished growing. Behind the sequin jackets and choreographed spins, Michael's childhood bled away, drop by precious drop. His father Joe watched from the wings, arms crossed, face stone. Love was measured in record sales. Affection came wrapped in newspaper reviews. Michael learned to read approval in box office numbers and Billboard rankings. When the numbers climbed, his father's face softened fractionally. When they dipped, the belt came out. This was the equation that governed his universe: perform or perish, succeed or suffer, smile or else. The other boys envied Michael's spotlight. They didn't see the price tag attached. They didn't watch him crying in dressing rooms between sets, wiping tears before they smudged his makeup. They didn't hear him whispering to himself in mirrors, practicing expressions, rehearsing spontaneity. Natural talent wasn't enough. It had to look effortless, feel magical, seem impossible. The audience paid to witness miracles, and Michael delivered them nightly, even when his feet bled inside his shoes. Fame arrived before puberty. Money flooded in before wisdom could guide its use. Michael existed in a strange limbo, neither child nor adult, worshipped but not understood, desired but not truly known. Fans projected their dreams onto him. Adults saw profit potential. Nobody saw the frightened boy trapped inside the phenomenon, drowning in applause, suffocating under expectations that multiplied with every performance. The transition from child star to adult artist destroys most performers. The public grows bored. The voice changes. The magic fades. Michael refused that fate with ferocious determination. He studied James Brown until his feet memorized every slide and spin. He absorbed Fred Astaire until grace became his default setting. He watched performers succeed and fail, learning from both, building a mental encyclopedia of what worked and what didn't. This education happened in green rooms and tour buses, replacing the classroom education he'd never receive. By the time Michael turned 20, he'd spent 15 years in show business. He'd earned millions and lost his innocence. He'd conquered stages worldwide but couldn't conquer the loneliness that shadowed his every step. The Jackson 5 was fragmenting. Brothers grew tired of living in his shadow. They wanted normal lives, families, freedom from the relentless touring schedule. Michael couldn't understand their desire for normalcy. Performance was his oxygen. The stage was the only place he felt truly alive. Without it, who was he? What purpose did his existence serve? The question haunted him as the 70s ended. Solo albums beckoned. Hollywood called. The music industry was evolving, and Michael needed to evolve with it or face obsolescence. He'd been famous since childhood, but child stardom was a prison with invisible bars. Now he needed to break free, to prove he could captivate audiences as an adult, to demonstrate his talent wasn't just cute tricks and prepubescent charm. The world was watching. Millions of eyes tracked his every move. The pressure crushed most people. For Michael, it was just another day of proving he deserved to exist. Quincy Jones saw something in Michael that others missed. Not just talent, which was obvious, but hunger. A desperate, clawing need to transcend ordinary greatness and achieve something immortal. They locked themselves in studios for months, crafting off the wall. The album exploded. Critics praised it. Fans devoured it. Michael had successfully transitioned from child star to adult artist, a feat that seemed impossible. But success wasn't enough. It never would be. The Grammy Awards snubbed off the wall. Michael sat in the audience, face frozen in a practiced smile, dying inside. He'd given everything to that album. Every note was perfect. Every song was crafted with obsessive attention to detail. Yet the industry barely acknowledged it. That night, rage and humiliation mixed inside him, creating a toxic fuel. He made a vow in the darkness of his limousine. The next album wouldn't just be good. It would be undeniable. Revolutionary. So powerful that ignoring it would be impossible. Thriller wasn't born. It was forged in fire. Michael pushed himself and everyone around him to breaking points. Songs were recorded dozens of times until every breath, every inflection, every background note aligned perfectly. He demanded the impossible and somehow achieved it. Quincy tried to rein him in, to remind him that perfection was a myth. Michael didn't care. Myths were exactly what he intended to create. The album dropped and reality shifted. Thriller didn't just sell. It colonized popular culture. The music video revolutionized the medium, transforming promotional clips into cinematic events. Michael's dancing became more than movement. It was storytelling without words, emotion expressed through ankles and fingertips. The moonwalk debuted on Motown 25, and the world stopped breathing. How could a human being move backward while appearing to move forward? The contradiction was pure Michael, advancing while retreating, soaring while falling, triumphant while tragic. Numbers became meaningless when they grew too large to comprehend. Millions of albums sold became tens of millions. Tens became hundreds. Thriller wasn't just the best-selling album of its year, or its decade. It became the best-selling album of all time. Michael had achieved his goal. He'd created something undeniable, unforgettable, unprecedented. Victory should have tasted sweet. Instead, it tasted empty. The pressure to follow Thriller was crushing. How do you surpass perfection? How do you outshine the brightest light ever created? Michael retreated deeper into his fantasy world. Neverland Ranch became his refuge, a sprawling estate designed to recapture the childhood he'd lost. Amusement park rides sat beside petting zoos. Movie theaters shared space with elaborate gardens. It was beautiful and deeply sad, a grown man desperately trying to rewind time, to find innocence in carousels and cotton candy. His appearance began changing. Subtle alterations at first, then dramatic transformations. The nose narrowed. The skin lightened. He claimed vitiligo, a medical condition that destroys pigmentation. Truth and perception diverged into separate universes. The public saw a man destroying himself. Michael saw necessary refinements, corrections to the face that stared back from mirrors and magazine covers, the face that never looked quite right to him, no matter how many surgeries promised improvement. Relationships crumbled under the weight of his fame. Genuine connection became impossible when everyone wanted something. Friends saw opportunities. Associates saw profit. Potential romantic partners saw headlines and paychecks. Michael collected people who told him yes, surrounding himself with employees who depended on his money, creating an echo chamber where dissent didn't exist. The isolation intensified. Walls rose higher. Trust evaporated like morning dew under a merciless sun. The physical toll mounted silently. Decades of dancing destroyed his body joint by joint. Pain became his constant companion. Injuries from elaborate performances accumulated, each one adding to the burden his frame carried. Doctors prescribed pills. Michael took them gratefully, needing relief from agony that never abated. The pills worked until they didn't. Then stronger pills arrived. Then injections. Then experimental treatments that promised miracles and delivered dependency. Bad arrived, attempting to recapture Thriller's magic. It sold phenomenally by any reasonable standard. But reasonable standards didn't apply to Michael Jackson. Anything less than unprecedented seemed like failure. Critics noted the edge in his voice, the aggression in his lyrics. Michael was fighting back against something, though nobody could identify exactly what. Perhaps he was battling expectations. Perhaps he was wrestling his own demons. Perhaps the enemy was simply time itself, the relentless march toward irrelevance that claimed every star eventually. The tabloids discovered they could profit from his oddities. Stories multiplied. Some were true, many were fabricated, most existed in the murky space between fact and fiction. Michael slept in hyperbaric chambers. Michael wanted to buy the Elephant Man's bones. Michael was becoming something other than human. The narrative spun beyond his control, creating a mythology that overshadowed his artistry. The music became secondary to the spectacle of his unraveling. The allegations arrived like an earthquake, shattering the foundation of Michael's world. A 13-year-old boy made accusations that changed everything. The details were horrifying. Parents trusted Michael with their children. His home was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where kids could experience the childhood Michael himself had lost. Now that sanctuary looked sinister. Innocence transformed into predation in the public's mind overnight. Michael denied everything with desperate intensity. His lawyers mobilized. Investigators descended on Neverland. The media circus reached heights previously unimaginable. Every news cycle brought fresh speculation. Supporters defended him fiercely, pointing to his charitable work, his gentle nature, his documented love for children. Detractors saw manipulation and grooming. Truth became irrelevant when perception held absolute power. The case settled out of court for $23 million. To the public, the settlement screamed guilt. Why pay if you're innocent? Michael's team argued differently. The financial cost was nothing compared to the emotional devastation of a trial. The media scrutiny would be unbearable. The testimony would be humiliating. Better to pay and move forward. But you can't purchase reputation. Money can't rebuild trust. The settlement solved nothing while poisoning everything. Sponsorships evaporated. Pepsi dropped him despite years of lucrative partnership. Radio stations reduced his airplay. The king of pop was being dethroned in real time, not by a better artist or changing tastes, but by accusations that stained everything he'd built. His music remained brilliant. His performances still captivated. But the shadow hanging over him grew too dark for many to see past. Michael married Lisa Marie Presley in a union that felt more strategic than romantic. The daughter of Elvis Presley and the king of pop should have been a fairytale match. Instead, it felt calculated, designed to rehabilitate his image. Lisa Marie defended him publicly, insisting their love was real. But marriages built on public relations rarely survive reality's harsh light. They divorced after 2 years, another failure added to Michael's growing collection. His behavior grew more erratic. Public appearances became increasingly bizarre. He dangled his baby over a hotel balcony while fans screamed in horror below. He wore surgical masks in public, covered his children's faces with scarves and masks, spoke in whispers to reporters who strained to hear him. The man who'd once commanded stages with supernatural confidence now seemed fragile, broken, barely holding himself together. History arrived as his most personal album yet. Defensive, angry, wounded. The songs addressed his pain directly. They Don't Care About Us channeled his rage at persecution. Scream let his fury explode into Janet's harmonies. The album was brilliant and uncomfortable, revealing wounds that hadn't healed, grievances that festered. Critics praised his honesty while questioning his mental state. The dichotomy was pure Michael, genius and instability dancing together. Financial problems began surfacing despite hundreds of millions earned. Money flowed out faster than it flowed in. Neverland's maintenance cost millions annually. His entourage required constant payment. Shopping sprees became legendary. He'd buy entire stores' inventory on whims. Money was abstract, numbers on paper that meant nothing compared to the temporary comfort material possessions provided. Advisors warned him. Accountants showed him spreadsheets. Michael didn't care about numbers unless they measured record sales. The second set of allegations arrived in 2003, more devastating than the first. Another boy, another family, another betrayal of trust. This time there would be no settlement. This time Michael would stand trial, face his accusers, defend himself in court. The trial became a media spectacle that made the previous controversy look tame. Every detail was dissected. Every witness was analyzed. The world watched as the man who'd entertained billions stood accused of the unthinkable. The courtroom became his stage, but the performance was torture. Michael arrived in pajamas one day, having been hospitalized. Other days he moved like a ghost, hollow-eyed and skeletal. The weight loss was alarming. His skin looked translucent. He seemed to be disappearing before the world's eyes, dissolving under pressure that would have killed most people years earlier. But he endured. Day after terrible day, he showed up and faced the nightmare. The verdict came in June 2005. Not guilty on all counts. Michael collapsed in relief. His supporters celebrated. But vindication in court didn't equal vindication in culture. Half the population still believed the accusations. The stain remained. His career was effectively over. No promoter would book him. No network would feature him. The king of pop was in exile, persona non grata in the country that had crowned him. Debt consumed Michael like quicksand. The money problems that seemed manageable became catastrophic. Bank of America demanded repayment on massive loans. Neverland faced foreclosure. The fantasy kingdom he'd built was collapsing, the rides rusting, the animals being relocated, the magic evaporating. He was losing his refuge, the one place he'd felt safe, the home he'd poured his dreams into. He fled to Bahrain, accepting hospitality from a sheikh who wanted the reflected glory of housing Michael Jackson. The Middle East provided distance from American judgment, but you can't outrun your reputation. Scandals followed him across oceans. Creditors pursued him internationally. His finances were so tangled that multiple accountants couldn't unravel them. Money that should have sustained him for lifetimes had vanished into mismanagement, theft, and spectacular waste. The physical decline accelerated. Chronic pain from decades of performances intensified. His back, his knees, his ankles, everything hurt constantly. Doctors prescribed increasingly powerful medications. Painkillers became crutches, then necessities, then addictions he couldn't break. His tolerance increased until normal doses accomplished nothing. He needed stronger drugs administered more frequently just to function. The line between medical treatment and substance abuse blurred into non-existence. Sleep became impossible. Insomnia plagued him for years, his mind racing through anxieties that multiplied in darkness. Worries about money, reputation, his children's future, his legacy, his mortality. The thoughts circled endlessly, preventing the rest his exhausted body desperately needed. He'd go days without real sleep, functioning on pills and paranoia and the momentum of decades spent pushing through exhaustion. His children became his purpose. Prince, Paris, and Blanket represented hope, the possibility that something good could emerge from the wreckage of his life. He protected them obsessively, hiding their faces, limiting their exposure, trying to give them the privacy he'd never experienced. But protecting them meant isolating them. They lived in a bubble as strange as Neverland, surrounded by security and strangeness, never quite connecting with normal childhood. Desperate for money, Michael agreed to a comeback tour. This Is It was announced as his final performances, 50 shows at London's O2 Arena. Tickets sold out instantly, proving his draw remained powerful despite everything. Fans still loved him. They wanted to see the magic one more time, to witness the moonwalk, to hear his voice live, to touch the legend before he disappeared forever. The pressure was immense. These performances had to be perfect. His reputation demanded it. His financial survival required it. Rehearsals began in Los Angeles. Videos showed Michael dancing, his movements still sharp despite his age. His voice remained powerful when he sang. For moments, the old magic flickered back to life. But those moments were brief. He struggled with stamina. He forgot lyrics. His weight dropped to dangerous levels. Staff worried but said nothing, afraid to jeopardize the tour, the jobs, the money. Dr. Conrad Murray entered Michael's life as a solution to the insomnia. A cardiologist willing to do what others wouldn't, administer propofol, a powerful anesthetic meant for surgery, as a sleep aid. It was reckless. Dangerous. Medically indefensible. But Michael was desperate, and Murray needed the $150,000 monthly salary. They were two drowning men clinging to each other, pulling each other deeper beneath the waves. The house on Carrollwood Drive became Michael's final residence. Rented, temporary, nothing like Neverland. His children lived there with him, along with Murray and security staff. The home should have been filled with excitement about the upcoming tour. Instead, it was filled with dread. Michael's health was deteriorating. His weight had dropped below a healthy level. He complained constantly of being cold, his body unable to maintain temperature. These were warning signs everyone ignored or explained away. The rehearsal footage from his final days is haunting. Michael moves through routines with mechanical precision, his body remembering what his spirit no longer felt. His eyes look empty. The spark that had defined him for 50 years was dimming. Those who worked with him noticed but said nothing. Speaking up meant risking everything. Silence was safer, easier, more profitable. On June 24, 2009, Michael rehearsed at the Staples Center. He performed Earth Song with surprising energy. Footage shows him pointing at the crew, smiling, saying this is it. This is really it. Nobody realized he was speaking a prophecy. This was indeed it. The final performance. The last time Michael Jackson would stand on a stage and do what he was born to do. Hours later, he'd be dead. The magic would be extinguished forever. Morning came to Carrollwood Drive like any other morning. Michael was restless again, unable to sleep despite the pills Murray had given him. Anxiety about the tour consumed him. The first show was 12 days away. 12 days to regain his strength, perfect his performances, silence the doubters who said he was too old, too damaged, too broken to pull off 50 concerts. 12 days that he'd never see. Murray administered propofol at approximately 10:40 a.m., the same dangerous drug he'd been using for weeks to knock Michael unconscious. Sleep wasn't sleep anymore. It was medically induced oblivion, a pharmaceutical coma that mimicked rest without providing its benefits. Murray hooked up the 4-drip and then made the fatal mistake. He left the room. He made phone calls to his girlfriends while Michael lay alone, monitors beeping, poison flowing into his veins. When Murray returned, Michael wasn't breathing. Panic replaced professional composure. CPR on the bed, ineffective because beds are too soft. The 911 call came too late, Murray's voice shaking as he tried to explain the unexplainable. Paramedics arrived to chaos. They found Michael Jackson, the most famous entertainer in the world, lying lifeless while a doctor frantically tried to revive what was already gone. They transported him to UCLA Medical Center knowing it was futile, but protocol demanded the attempt. The hospital pronounced Michael Jackson dead at 2:26 p.m. on June 25, 2009. Cause of death, acute propofol intoxication. Manner of death, homicide. The king of pop had been killed by the very solution he'd sought for his suffering. The pills that promised relief had delivered death. The doctor who swore to do no harm had destroyed the patient he was supposed to protect. It was senseless. Preventable. Tragic in a way that transcended normal tragedy. News of his death spread like wildfire. Social media crashed from the traffic. News networks interrupted regular programming. People stopped what they were doing and wept. Grown adults who'd grown up with his music felt like they'd lost a family member. His death wasn't just the loss of a performer. It was the end of an era, the severing of a connection to childhood for millions who'd moonwalked in their living rooms and imitated his spins in school hallways. The outpouring of grief was unprecedented. Fans gathered outside the hospital, outside his house, outside Neverland. They held vigils. They sang his songs. They cried for the man they felt they knew, even though they'd never met him. The paradox was complete. Millions loved him, yet nobody had saved him. Everyone had watched him suffer. Everyone had seen the warning signs. But love without action is just sentiment, and sentiment doesn't stop tragedy. His memorial service was held at the Staples Center, the venue where he'd rehearsed his final performance. Stars gathered to pay tribute. Usher sang through tears. Stevie Wonder spoke of musical genius. His daughter Paris, 11 years old, approached the microphone and broke hearts with her words, "Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine." Her voice cracked. The world cracked with it. This was the real tragedy, the human cost beyond the celebrity. 3 children without their father, a family shattered, a man reduced to headlines and hashtags. The investigation into his death led to Murray's arrest. The trial revealed the extent of the negligence. 6 weeks of propofol administration. No proper monitoring equipment. No emergency supplies. A doctor more concerned with his paycheck than his patient's life. Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and served less than 2 years. 2 years for ending Michael Jackson's life. The injustice was staggering but not surprising. Nothing about Michael's death made sense. Why should the punishment? His estate fought to preserve his legacy. Music was released posthumously. This Is It footage became a documentary. His catalog continued earning millions, more in death than in his final living years. But money couldn't answer the questions that haunted everyone who'd known him or loved his art. Could he have been saved? Should someone have intervened? Why did fame exact such a terrible price? The allegations from his past resurfaced periodically, dividing opinion, complicating grief. Some couldn't mourn a man they believed was a monster. Others separated the art from the artist, celebrating his musical genius while acknowledging the troubling accusations. There were no easy answers. Michael Jackson existed in a space beyond simple judgment, too complicated to be purely villain or purely victim, too human to be the god his fans worshipped, too damaged to be the monster his detractors described. Years passed. The grief evolved but never disappeared. New generations discovered his music and experienced their own moonwalk moments. Thriller still dominates Halloween playlists. Billie Jean still fills dance floors. His influence permeates modern pop music. Every performer who emphasizes dancing learned from Michael. Every artist obsessed with perfection walks a path he carved. His shadow stretches across decades, touching people who weren't born when he died. The lesson of Michael Jackson's life is painful and necessary. Talent doesn't protect you. Fame doesn't save you. Money can't buy peace. Millions of fans can love you, yet you can die alone in a rented house with a negligent doctor and a drug that should never have been used. Love without intervention is worthless. Admiration without action is empty. We watched him suffer in real time, and we did nothing. We bought his albums and attended his concerts, but we didn't save him. Nobody saved him. The title remains true years after his death: loved by millions, saved by none. Michael Jackson gave the world everything he had. His childhood, his privacy, his sanity, his health, his life. He poured it all into performances that brought joy to billions. He created magic with his body and voice, transcending race and language and geography to touch something universal in human souls. And the world took and took and took until there was nothing left to give. Then we mourned. Then we moved on. But the question lingers in the silence after applause: could we have saved him? And if we could have, why didn't we? The answer is as complicated as the man himself, lost somewhere between the moonwalk and the morphine, between the boy from Gary and the ghost in the mirror, between the love of millions and the salvation of none.